First story, A Tale of the Unseen, Sonora Desert, 1990. I've debated for a long time whether I should share this or not, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that maybe someone out there will understand what happened to me. I never asked for this. I was just a guy, a mechanic from Canada, who wanted a break from my regular life. The Sonora Desert in Arizona seemed like a peaceful place to escape for a few days. I had planned on just camping, relaxing, and getting away from the chaos of the city. I never thought I would be the one to experience something like this, but here I am. This happened back in 1990, and it still haunts me every day. That night, the desert was quiet, way too quiet. You could hear the wind brushing the sand, and that was about it. I went to sleep that evening without any particular worries. It was just before dawn when I woke up to a sound I can't even describe. It wasn't a noise like anything I had ever heard before. A low humming sound, almost like a vibration in the air that rattled through my bones. It felt unnatural, like the very atmosphere had shifted. I sat up quickly, heart racing, as I tried to focus my eyes in the darkness. And that's when I saw it. A beam of light. A brilliant, piercing white light coming straight down from the sky, lighting up the desert like it was midday. I thought it might have been some kind of helicopter, or maybe a plane passing overhead, but the thing is, this beam wasn't moving. It stayed there, unwavering. The humming got louder, and my body felt off, like it wasn't responding to my commands. I tried to move. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. It was like my body had been suddenly frozen, paralyzed in place. I could feel the terror creeping in, but I couldn't even scream. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my body felt like it was being pulled upward. As the beam of light continued to shine down on me, I felt myself being lifted off the ground. It wasn't like floating in the air or being suspended by some invisible force. It felt more like I was being dragged. The sensation was so bizarre, like my feet weren't even touching the earth anymore, but my body still felt heavy. I couldn't look away from the light, couldn't fight whatever was happening. I remember thinking that I wasn't going to make it out of there alive. And that's when I saw them. I don't know how to describe them. They weren't like anything I had ever seen before, not in any of the sci-fi movies or books I had read. Their skin was a dull shade of blue, almost grayish, and their eyes were the most unsettling thing. They weren't human, at least not in any way I could understand. They were huge, and their pupils glowed like they were on fire, reflecting the light from above. It wasn't a feeling of fear, but more like a primal sense of something completely out of place. I couldn't even think properly, but I somehow knew they weren't good. These things, they weren't here to help. I couldn't look away from their eyes, like I was trapped in a stare, as if my mind was being pulled into some abyss. I felt a coldness creeping up my spine as one of them approached me, its movements smooth and deliberate. My body still wasn't responding to me, and the more I tried to focus, the more I felt myself slipping into a fog. They moved with a strange grace, like they knew exactly what they were doing, as though they had done this countless times before. I was helpless, frozen, paralyzed, completely at their mercy. I couldn't even flinch. I tried to scream, to shout, but nothing came out. One of them reached out with long, elongated fingers and touched my chest. The contact was cold, almost metallic. I felt my body being scanned, like they were searching for something inside me. It was the most invasive thing I could imagine, and I could do nothing but endure it. My mind felt like it was spinning, and every part of me screamed to wake up, to break free. But it was like my consciousness was being pushed to the side, leaving me completely vulnerable. And then they started to probe deeper, examining my body like I was some kind of specimen. I couldn't feel the physical pain at first. It was more like the sensation of being touched in a way that felt completely wrong, unnatural. At one point, I felt something sharp in my wrist, like a needle being inserted. I couldn't see it, couldn't feel it with my hands, but I felt the pressure under my skin. It was as if they were implanting something inside me. It burned. I thought for a moment that I would pass out from the intensity of it, but somehow I stayed conscious, trapped in the terror of what was happening. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. The buzzing sound continued to fill the air, getting louder and louder, as if it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. And then, just like that, it all stopped. The light vanished, the creatures disappeared, and the next thing I knew, I was back in the desert, lying on the sand. But things weren't right. I was miles away from my campsite. My surroundings had shifted, and everything looked different. It was like I had been moved. I couldn't understand what had happened. I sat up slowly, my body feeling numb, disoriented and heavy. My hands were trembling as I touched my face, my arms, anything to make sure I was really here, back in the desert. But the air felt strange, almost too still. It was like the world was holding its breath. I couldn't understand how I'd ended up so far from where I was supposed to be. The last thing I remembered was the light. It felt like hours had passed, but when I checked my watch, only a few minutes had gone by. There was no way. I had no recollection of walking, of moving. I couldn't even make sense of it. My body felt foreign, like it wasn't my own. But there was something else, a small, aching pain in my left wrist. As I looked down, I saw it. A small, barely noticeable incision near the pulse of my wrist, the skin slightly raised. I'm not a doctor, but I knew something was wrong. It wasn't just the incision, it felt deeper than that. Something was inside me, under the skin. I could almost feel it. I don't know how, but I could sense that there was something foreign lodged in my body, something that didn't belong. At that moment, the dread came back, washing over me like a tidal wave. What had they done to me? What was that thing they put in me? I tried to get up, but my legs were still unsteady. I stumbled around in a daze, looking for my gear, trying to make sense of everything. But everything seemed wrong. My campsite was nowhere in sight. I didn't know which way I had come from, where my car was, or how I had ended up in this part of the desert. I felt like I was completely alone, isolated in a place that was somehow both familiar and foreign at the same time. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Every time I turned around, I felt like I was being observed, but there was no one there, no one for miles. But I couldn't ignore the sensation of eyes on me. It was like the air itself was alive, full of something I couldn't comprehend. I spent hours trying to make my way back to the road, back to where I thought my car was, but it felt like I was walking in circles. The sun was starting to set, and panic began to set in. I had no phone, no GPS, and I had no idea which way was north anymore. It was like the desert was playing tricks on me, shifting and changing with every step I took. The light, the creatures. I couldn't get their faces out of my head. My wrist burned where the incision had been, a sharp pain that wouldn't go away. I could feel that metallic object inside me pressing against my skin. It wasn't just physical, It felt like it was affecting my mind too, clouding my thoughts, twisting everything around me into something unrecognizable. By the time I finally made it back to my car, I was exhausted. My body ached, and the confusion that had clouded my mind earlier was beginning to turn into full-blown terror. What had happened to me? I kept thinking that I was going to wake up, that this was some kind of nightmare. But no, this was real. My body didn't feel like it belonged to me, and that burn in my wrist, God, it wasn't normal. I drove back to the nearest town in a daze, trying to shake the feeling of being watched, of being followed. But even in the safety of my car, I couldn't escape it. I stopped at a small clinic when I arrived in town. The doctor there didn't seem to know what to make of my wrist, but he suggested I get it checked out by a specialist, thinking maybe it was some kind of bizarre injury. He cleaned the area around the incision and wrapped it up, but the whole time he kept looking at me strangely, like I was carrying something he didn't understand. I thought it was just my nerves. A few weeks later, I finally went to a specialist in Phoenix, hoping for some clarity. I still couldn't get rid of that sensation of something inside me, of that foreign object lodged in my wrist. The doctor ran all the usual tests, x-rays, blood work, everything. I could see his face change when the results came back. He wasn't alarmed, but he was puzzled. He called me back into his office after reviewing the scans and told me that according to everything he saw, there was something small, metallic, embedded in the tissue of my wrist. It wasn't a piece of bone. It wasn't a bullet fragment. It wasn't anything he'd ever seen before. He asked me if I had ever gotten into some kind of accident or if I could explain how this object had gotten there. But I couldn't. I didn't have an answer. He asked if I had been exposed to any unusual situations recently, anything that might explain the object. It was like he was tiptoeing around something, but I didn't know what. I left that office feeling more confused and frightened than I had been before. I wanted to believe it was just some kind of freak accident, some weird injury that I had no memory of. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the truth. That object wasn't natural. There was no way that incision had come from anything human. What had those things done to me? Why had they chosen me? These questions have haunted me for years. And now every time I look at that scar on my wrist, I can't stop thinking about what happened. It's like there's something buried deep inside me. Something I can't fully understand. Something that wasn't meant to be there. I've tried to tell myself it's just a weird medical anomaly, but I can't escape the feeling that whatever happened in that desert, whatever I experienced, was real. The object is still there, still embedded in my skin, and no matter how many doctors I see, no one can explain it. Over the years, I've tried to forget about it, tried to move on, but the truth is I can't. Every now and then, I still feel that same eerie sensation in my wrist, a coldness, like the thing inside me is still active, like it's waiting. Sometimes I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched, even when I'm in my own home. I've never told anyone the full extent of what happened to me, not even my family. They'd probably think I was losing my mind, but I know what I felt. I know what I saw. I've tried to rationalize it, tried to tell myself it was just a strange, unexplained experience, but there's always a part of me that knows that's not true. I feel it deep inside me. Something's not right. And the thought of it, of what's still inside me, still fills me with dread. Sometimes when I'm alone, I think back to the desert, to the cold stare of those creatures. I can still remember their eyes, the way they glowed in the darkness, the way they watched me like I was nothing more than an experiment. I wish I could say I found some closure after all these years, that I've figured out what happened. But the truth is, I haven't. I don't know if I ever will. There are nights when I lay awake, unable to sleep, wondering if they'll come back. What do they want from me? Why me? I don't have the answers, and I don't think I ever will. But one thing's for sure, I will never forget that feeling of being completely powerless, completely at their mercy. The light, the buzzing, the coldness, those things will stay with me forever. I can't escape it, and I don't think I ever will. I know I'm not the only one who's had this kind of experience, and maybe I'm not the only one with something inside them. But there's no way to explain it. There's no way to make sense of it. I wish I could tell you it was all a dream, that I was just imagining things, but I can't. I lived it. I felt it. And even now, all these years later, I can still feel it. I don't know if the truth will ever come out, or if anyone will ever understand what really happened that night. All I know is that I'll never be the same. I've tried to live a normal life, but the memories of that night, of those creatures, and of the strange metallic object in my wrist, they won't go away. And the worst part, I don't know if they'll ever stop watching me. Second story. The Sphere in the Desert. Atacama Desert, Chile, 1978. It was supposed to be just another day out in the field, but looking back, I should have known something was wrong the moment my compass started acting up. I had been out there, in the Atacama Desert, near some rock formations, doing my usual work as a geologist. The air was dry, the sun relentless, and the whole landscape looked like it had been untouched for centuries. I'd worked in remote areas before, so the isolation never bothered me, but on that day something felt off. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of something I would never be able to explain. I checked my compass to get my bearings, but it wasn't just a little off. It was spinning wildly, like it was possessed or caught in some invisible force. I turned it in all directions, hoping it was a malfunction, but the needle wouldn't settle. That's when the pain hit. A sharp, searing headache, right in the center of my skull, making my vision blur. I staggered, trying to focus on the landscape, but my head felt like it was splitting open. I could barely stand, let alone think straight. And then, I saw it, a sphere hovering above the ground, metallic and glowing faintly in the harsh desert light. It wasn't moving, just hanging there, silent and still, like it had been there forever. My mind couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. I thought, maybe I was just seeing things. Heat stroke or exhaustion, or whatever excuse I could come up with to dismiss the impossible. But the more I tried to look away, the clearer it became that this wasn't something I could explain. The sphere was hovering there, suspended with no visible means of support, almost mocking the laws of physics. My headache intensified, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. It wasn't just the shape or the way it hung there. It was the feeling it gave me. Something cold, something alien, creeping into my very bones. I took a few shaky steps back, heart pounding, but my body wouldn't listen. I couldn't look away. The next thing I remember, everything went black. It wasn't like falling asleep. It was like my consciousness was just snatched away, ripped from my body. I don't know how long I was out, but when I came to, I wasn't in the desert anymore. I woke up in a place that didn't make sense. The air was thick with a sterile, almost suffocating scent, and the ground beneath me was soft, like some kind of padded surface. I couldn't move at first. My body felt heavy, like I was waking from a deep sleep, and my mind was racing, trying to catch up with where I was and how I got there. I tried to sit up, but when I did, I realized I couldn't. My body was frozen, or maybe paralyzed. My eyes darted around, scanning the surroundings. Everything around me was white, blindingly, intensely white. The walls were smooth, almost organic, and the space felt impossibly large, though I couldn't see the edges. It felt like being inside some sort of giant, sterile chamber, like I was the only thing there. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I tried to call out, but no sound came from my mouth. And then I saw them. There were figures standing just outside my peripheral vision, moving closer, their features barely visible in the blinding light. At first I thought they were human, but the longer I looked at them, the more I realized they weren't. Their skin was a strange shade of gray, smooth and almost featureless. Their eyes were black, dark, empty voids, and they stared at me with a cold, unsettling gaze, as if they were observing an insect under a microscope. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even blink. I don't know how long I was there, frozen in place, but it felt like an eternity. The figures, if that's even what they were, didn't speak. There was no sound at all, except for the thumping of my own pulse, echoing in my ears. Every second felt like a lifetime. I tried to look around, to gather any sense of where I was or how to escape, but my mind was clouded, like I was being suffocated by a thick fog. There were flashes of images, though, glimpses of things that didn't belong in my world. Advanced machinery, spacecrafts of unimaginable size, landscapes I couldn't even recognize. It was like a stream of visions, too fast to fully grasp, but all connected to something far beyond anything I knew. I was aware of them watching me, and it made my skin crawl. But there was nothing I could do. It wasn't like I could fight them or run. I felt small, like I was nothing more than a specimen to them. I could feel the weight of their gaze, studying me, probing my every thought, even though they never spoke. And then, it was as if I could feel their presence shift. One of them moved closer, and for the first time, I felt something. An intense pressure in my head, a force that made me feel like my skull was going to split open. It was like they were injecting something into my mind, flooding me with information that I couldn't fully understand. But it was all there, clear and undeniable. I saw images of space, stars, planets, strange civilizations, and then there were flashes of machines too. Advanced technology, things that couldn't possibly exist. My thoughts weren't my own anymore. I couldn't stop the flood of data pouring into my consciousness. It wasn't just visions, it was knowledge, raw and alien, overwhelming me. They weren't just showing me things, they were teaching me or perhaps implanting something inside me. I don't know how to describe it, but it felt like I was absorbing everything at once. It hurt. A deep, insidious pain that reached into my mind and twisted it. The information was alien, beyond my comprehension, but I felt it sink into my very being. I don't know how long it went on for. It felt like hours, but it could have been minutes. Time didn't make sense anymore. And then, as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. I was released from the pressure, the pain, the alien presence. I blinked, disoriented, and found myself back in the desert. The hot sun was beating down on me again, and I could hear the wind, the distant sound of something normal. But it wasn't the same, it felt wrong. I was lying in the sand, my body aching as if I'd been through some kind of trauma. I sat up slowly, my hands trembling, and looked around. My equipment was scattered around me, my tools, my bag, the compass that had been spinning uncontrollably just hours before. But something was different. My watch was the first thing I noticed. It was still on my wrist, but it was completely wrong. The time was off. Several hours had disappeared, gone, like they'd never existed. I didn't know what to think. I wanted to scream, to get help, but there was no one around. Just the vast emptiness of the desert stretching out before me. I stood up shakily, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My head was still, spinning, and every part of me felt wrong, disconnected, like I wasn't entirely myself anymore. I started picking up my gear, trying to organize it, but it felt like a blur. My hands moved mechanically, almost like someone else was controlling them. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that something was still watching me, even though I was surrounded by nothing but the barren desert. The heat was unbearable, but I couldn't bring myself to care. It was like I was floating in a fog, disconnected from everything around me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and glanced around for any sign of what had happened. There was no trace of the sphere, no sign that anything unusual had even occurred. It was like it had never been there at all. I took a few tentative steps, feeling the weight of the desert press down on me, and tried to collect my thoughts. My compass was still spinning wildly, like it had a mind of its own. I tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting back to those cold black eyes, staring at me in that sterile white space. They were always watching. I couldn't get rid of the feeling. It wasn't until later, when I managed to get back to the nearest town, that I began to realize how much had changed in me. I don't know how to explain it, but I wasn't the same person anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about those creatures, about the technology, about everything that had been shown to me. It was like my mind was carrying some kind of burden, a knowledge I wasn't supposed to have, but that had been forced into me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was now part of something much larger, something beyond the scope of anything I could comprehend. I tried to tell myself it was just a hallucination or some kind of brain damage from the heat, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. There was something in me, something alien, and I couldn't escape it. The flashes still came to me sometimes, visions of ships in the sky, planets far away, strange landscapes. I didn't know how to handle it. It was like I had been marked, and no matter how hard I tried to forget, the images, the knowledge, kept coming back. I kept telling myself I'd just make it go away, but it never did. It was like an itch in my mind, a constant reminder that something had happened to me out there in the desert that day. A few weeks later, I received a visit from a group of ufologists. I didn't know how they'd found out about me, but when they showed up at my door, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. They were all over the place asking questions, probing for answers. They didn't believe me at first. They thought it was some kind of mental breakdown or a case of dehydration. But when I told them about the equipment I had found scattered around me, when I mentioned the odd behavior of my compass and the strange malfunction of my watch, they started to listen. They told me that they had been investigating anomalies in the area where I had been, things that didn't make sense, electromagnetic disturbances, strange occurrences. They asked if I had experienced anything like that, and I told them everything. Every single detail. They recorded everything, took notes, and left me with more questions than answers. But what really shook me was when they confirmed something I had already feared. They found something out there. They found strange electromagnetic anomalies, disturbances that couldn't be explained by natural causes. The readings were off, the charts, and they couldn't figure out what was causing it. They didn't say it outright, but I could tell from the way they looked at me that they believed my story. The weeks that followed were a blur. I couldn't escape the constant feeling of being watched, like I was never truly alone. Every time I looked up at the sky, I thought I saw something there. A flash, a movement, something that didn't belong. My sleep became erratic. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding as if something had just left me. I'd close my eyes, trying to shake the feeling, but every time I did, I saw flashes of the same images. The strange ships, the unearthly landscapes, those creatures with the black eyes. It wasn't a dream, it couldn't be. I felt it. It was real. I even started researching the desert, looking for any other reports of strange occurrences. But every time I found something, it was dismissed. People thought I was crazy, that I was just another person claiming to have had a run-in with aliens. I tried to talk to the ufologists again, but they were cryptic. They didn't want to tell me too much, and honestly, I don't think they had the answers either. All they said was that the disturbance in the desert was unlike anything they had ever seen before. I felt like I was drowning in questions with no answers. It was around this time that I noticed something else. I wasn't just experiencing the flashes of information and the eerie sensations. There was something physical, something that had changed in me. I couldn't explain it at first, but it became obvious after a few weeks. My body felt different. I don't know how to describe it, but I felt lighter, almost detached. It was like I was operating on autopilot, like I was no longer fully present in my own skin. I would go days without remembering small things, where I left my keys, what I ate for dinner, or even simple conversations. It was as if chunks of time were missing from my memory, and they weren't just moments I forgot. It was like those moments were simply erased. I couldn't put it together, but I felt like a part of me had been removed, as though I was no longer whole. I kept looking in the mirror, hoping to see something that would make sense, but every time I did, I felt a deep sense of unfamiliarity. It was as if the person staring back at me wasn't really me. And then one night, months after the incident, something happened that I'll never forget. I was sitting in my small apartment, scrolling through some old field notes, when I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my head. It was like that same pressure from before, but this time it was stronger, deeper, like it was coming from inside my skull. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and I thought I was going to pass out. Then, without warning, I felt a strange sensation, like a tug, almost like something was pulling at me from the inside. I stumbled to my feet, my heart racing, and rushed to the window, hoping to get some air, but the street below was empty. There was no one around. And then I saw it. The light. A small, glowing orb in the sky, just like the one I saw in the desert that day. It wasn't as big, but it was there, hovering, pulsing with that same strange light. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I couldn't move. It was like time had stopped. But then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat there, staring at the empty sky, trying to process what had just happened. My mind was racing, but it was all a blur. Too many questions, too many unanswered pieces to this bizarre puzzle. The light had been so familiar, too familiar. It was like it was calling to me, reminding me of something I couldn't quite remember. I kept thinking about that moment in the desert, the sphere, the creatures, the knowledge they had shoved into my mind. It felt like I was being pulled back, like I was part of something much bigger than I could understand. I tried to shake it off, but every time I closed my eyes, the images returned. The ships, the landscapes, those creatures with their cold, unblinking eyes. And then there was that feeling, the feeling that something was inside me, something that had changed me. It wasn't just the memories. It was like I had become connected to something else, something far away. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't remember exactly how I had left that place, how I had gotten back to the desert. It was like there was a gap in my memory, a chunk of time I couldn't account for. I could remember waking up, but nothing in between, and it terrified me. I went back to the desert a few times after that night, though I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me there. I thought if I went back, I could find some kind of answer, some piece of the puzzle that would make sense of all of this. But every time I went, nothing happened. The land was empty, barren, just like before. There were no strange lights, no spheres, no creatures. Just the desert, silent and unforgiving. I tried to convince myself it had all been a hallucination, a trick of the mind, but deep down, I knew the truth. Something had happened to me out there, something I couldn't explain. I started seeing doctors, trying to get answers, trying to figure out what had gone wrong with me, but all they could do was run tests, tell me there was nothing physically wrong. Mentally, I was fine, they said, but I wasn't fine. I could feel it. Something had changed, something that couldn't be fixed with a prescription or a scan. I'm writing this now because, after all this time, I still don't know what to make of it. The memories are clearer now, but they still don't make sense. I haven't had another encounter with the lights, the creatures, or the sphere, but I can't shake the feeling that something is still out there. Watching. Waiting. Sometimes when I'm alone at night, I'll look up at the stars and feel this overwhelming sense of connection, like I'm still part of something much larger than myself. But no matter how much I search, no matter how many times I go back to the desert, I never find any answers. I don't know what happened to me, but I know it was real. Whatever it was, it changed me. And even though I may never understand it, I'll never forget that day in the desert. The day when my life became something else entirely. Third story, Marked by the Sky, Mojave Desert, 2018. I never thought I'd be one of those people sharing a story like this, but here I am, because there's no way I can explain what happened to me, and I don't know where else to turn. Maybe someone here will understand. It was back in 2018. I was in the Mojave Desert, doing what I usually do, filming for my travel vlog. Nothing special. I had my drone up, capturing the endless horizon of barren sand and jagged rocks, all that typical desert beauty. The sun was setting, and the sky was that deep orange I can never get enough of. As I was flying the drone, something weird happened. At first I thought it was just the usual interference, a glitch. But then I noticed a small light in the sky moving at a speed that didn't make any sense. It wasn't an airplane or anything else I recognized. It was too fast, too deliberate. I wasn't scared yet, though, just curious. I brought the drone a little closer, hoping to capture something. Then that's when everything changed. The moment the light got close to the drone, it flickered and went dead. The screen on my remote control went completely black, and the drone just froze in midair. I thought maybe it was just a technical failure. These things happen, right? But as I reached to restart it, I felt something strange. My body didn't respond the way it should have. I wasn't even tired, but I couldn't move. I stood there in the desert, my arms feeling like they were made of stone, my legs frozen, and this sense of wrongness started to settle in my stomach. That's when I saw it. The sky above me, once clear, was now filled with a glowing light. It wasn't just the object anymore. There were more lights, more shapes. They surrounded me, and it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. I tried to scream, nothing. My mouth wouldn't move. I couldn't even blink. I felt trapped, like my body was just an empty shell. When I finally came to, it felt like I'd been asleep for hours, though I had no recollection of falling unconscious. I was no longer standing in the desert. I was inside something. The air was thick, and the lights were dim, like being in a room with no windows. I couldn't tell how big it was, but I knew I wasn't alone. There were figures standing around me. At first, I thought I was seeing things, or maybe I was still dreaming. They weren't quite human, but not entirely alien either. They were humanoid, with elongated limbs, pale skin that shimmered slightly, and faces that were too smooth, too expressionless. I don't remember hearing them speak, not in any way I could recognize. But it didn't matter, because somehow I understood them. They communicated through images. It was like their thoughts were being sent directly into my mind. I saw things, memories, emotions, flashes of pure feeling, confusion, fear, curiosity, all in a rush. And somehow I was aware that they were doing the same with me, trying to understand me, my thoughts, my emotions. The more I tried to fight the overwhelming wave of images flooding my mind, the more intense they became. I couldn't tell if I was awake or still trapped in some bizarre dream, but I knew this felt real, so real. I tried asking them questions. What do you want from me? Why are you doing this? But they didn't respond the way I expected. Instead of hearing words or even seeing them speak, they gave me more images. It was like looking at a slideshow of feelings and places, vast, barren landscapes, dark skies and stars. The imagery was so sharp, so vivid, I could feel myself getting lost in it. Then, there was one image that stood out from the rest. A vision of me, alone in the desert, with the drone hovering nearby. The image shifted, and suddenly I was standing in front of a vast, endless night sky, filled with unfamiliar constellations. I could feel the cold air, see the stars burning so brightly, and for a moment it felt like I was connected to something greater, something beyond Earth. But it was more than that. There was a sensation of yearning. I tried to scream again, but no sound came out. I was caught in this place, unable to move, unable to fight whatever this was. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything, but it felt like my thoughts were slipping away from me. They didn't speak to me in words. They didn't need to. The way they communicated, it was like an exchange of emotions, raw and naked. I could feel the tension building in the air around me, a heaviness, a pressure that squeezed my chest and made it harder to breathe. And then, just as quickly as it had all started, I was released. I wasn't in that place anymore. 1 second I was frozen, surrounded by these beings, and the next I was back in the desert, kneeling on the sand, gasping for air. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my head was spinning. The first thing I noticed was that my drone was back in the air, hovering just a few feet away from me. My phone was beside me on the ground, and both looked completely untouched. The strangest thing, though, was that the footage from my camera, the video from that night, was completely corrupted. The file was there, but all I could see was static, noise, nothing. It was as if the entire experience had never happened, as if they erased it. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the corrupted footage, feeling this overwhelming sense of dread creeping over me. My hands were shaking, and there was a lump in my throat that I couldn't swallow. Everything felt wrong. I kept trying to make sense of what I'd just experienced. What was it? A dream? A hallucination? But nothing about it felt like either of those. I knew it was real. That feeling of being watched, of being studied, it wasn't something you just make up. But the worst part, the part that still haunts me. The moment I stood up and turned to head back to my car, I glanced up at the sky, and for the first time I realized how empty it felt. It was like I wasn't looking at stars anymore. I don't know how to explain it, but there was this absence, like the sky was watching me. I felt this strange pull toward it, this sensation of something deeper, something pulling at me from above. I couldn't shake it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the wind outside my car, but it wasn't the wind. It was like the air itself was alive and waiting. The days after that night were strange. I tried to go on with my usual routine, pretending nothing had happened, but it wasn't that easy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in me. I kept staring at the sky, almost expecting it to do something, to reveal something. I could still feel the images they had shown me, the weight of their silent communication pressing on my mind. At night, I would wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, as if I had just escaped something that was still right behind me. It wasn't just the fear, though. It was the feeling of connection, like the stars were calling to me, like I wasn't meant to be here, like I was missing something important. I kept having these dreams. They weren't just dreams, though. They felt more like memories of being with them, of standing in that strange, dark place, unable to move, unable to escape. And every time I woke up from one of those dreams, my body would feel cold, like I had been somewhere else, far away, for much longer than just a few hours. I started feeling a pull, a strange compulsion to go back to the desert. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was just stressed out, that the whole experience had messed with my head, but the pull didn't go away. It grew stronger. I tried to convince myself that I was just looking for answers, trying to make sense of what happened. But deep down, I knew I was searching for something else. There was this nagging feeling that I had missed something during that encounter. Something crucial. Something I couldn't remember, but I could feel. So I went back. I went back to the Mojave Desert alone, with nothing but my drone and my phone. The whole trip felt wrong from the start. I had this constant feeling that I was being watched, that I wasn't truly alone. I tried to shake it off, but it was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Every time I looked up at the sky, I felt it, a presence, a weight. It was like I wasn't just looking at stars anymore. I was looking at something else. As I set up the drone, I could hear my breath echoing in my ears, my heart racing in my chest. The air felt thick, heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I couldn't help but glance up at the sky again. And there it was. That same strange light, moving slowly across the horizon. It was the same one I'd seen before, but this time it was even closer. My stomach churned, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the controls. I watched, paralyzed, as the light came closer and closer, and then, just like the last time, the drone cut out. The same cold, the same paralysis. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The world around me went black again. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was that pull, the same pull I had felt before, the same pull toward the sky. It felt like something was waiting for me to come to it. When I woke up, I was back in the desert, but it was different this time. The air felt wrong, and there was an oppressive silence that hung over everything. My body felt heavy, like it had been drained of energy. I wasn't sure how long I'd been unconscious, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the sky above me. It was different. The stars, the constellations were all wrong, completely unfamiliar, like they didn't belong to our world. I felt dizzy just looking at them, like they were spinning around me, mocking me. I quickly grabbed my drone and phone, but the footage was still corrupted. That same static, that same void. No matter what I did, the video was always the same. Just noise, empty space. It was like they had wiped it all out. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like they were trying to erase the evidence of what had happened, of what they had done to me. And yet it didn't matter how much I tried to fight it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been changed. Something inside me had shifted, like I had been marked. I didn't feel like the same person anymore. The pull toward the sky, that yearning, it was still there. I couldn't escape it. Over the next few weeks, it only got worse. The dreams became more frequent, more vivid, and they weren't just dreams anymore. They were visions, or maybe even memories, but they weren't mine. I was there with them again. I saw their faces, those smooth, blank expressions. They didn't have eyes like we do, no real features, just a kind of emptiness. And yet somehow I knew they were looking at me, analyzing me, every night. It felt like I was being pulled back to them, like I was losing myself more and more, becoming part of something I couldn't understand. And then came the worst part, the connection. I started feeling things in the sky again. Could feel it, the pull. It wasn't just a physical sensation anymore, it was emotional, like I wasn't alone out here, like I was being watched. And the worst part? I could feel that they were waiting for me to come to them. I wasn't sure if I was being paranoid or if it was real, but I couldn't ignore it. I felt this connection to them, this weird bond that I couldn't break. I tried to go on with my life, tried to ignore the growing sense of dread, but it was impossible. I couldn't focus on anything anymore. The sky was always there, always looming over me, a constant reminder of whatever happened that night. I couldn't even look up without feeling that cold, heavy weight on my chest. And then the dreams started again. But this time, they weren't just dreams. I was there, standing with them in that cold, dark place, surrounded by the same beings. I could feel them, hear them, and this time I could communicate with them, not with words, but with emotions. I could feel their thoughts pressing against mine, feel them analyzing me like they were reading my soul. They didn't speak, but I knew what they wanted. I knew what they were doing to me. I was changing, The bond between us was growing stronger, and I couldn't stop it. I didn't know what they wanted with me, but I knew I wasn't just a random person anymore. I was part of something bigger. As time passed, I could no longer ignore what was happening. The pull, the connection, it was getting stronger every day. I tried to talk to people, tried to tell someone what was going on, but I knew they wouldn't believe me. How could they? I didn't even fully understand it myself. All I knew was that I was different. My thoughts weren't my own anymore. Every time I looked up at the sky, I could feel them, those beings wherever they were, watching me. It felt like they were waiting for me to make a decision, waiting for me to come to them on my own. My body felt light, almost weightless, like I was no longer tethered to the earth. I could barely sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt their presence, and it terrified me. It wasn't just a feeling of being watched, it was a feeling of being called. The dreams grew more intense, more vivid. I started hearing voices in my head, but they weren't real voices. They were like whispers, soft, distant but unmistakable. Every night they told me the same thing, come to us. It's time. One night I couldn't take it anymore. The pull was too strong, the voices too persistent. I found myself back in the Mojave Desert. I had no idea how I got there. It was like my body was moving on its own. I didn't even remember leaving my apartment. The desert was just as desolate as it had been before, but it felt different this time. The air was thick, and the sky above was dark, filled with those unfamiliar stars. I could feel the weight of them pressing down on me, suffocating me. And then I saw it again. That light. The same light from before, coming closer, faster this time. I wasn't afraid. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. It felt inevitable, like I was finally reaching the end of a long journey. The light surrounded me, and for a brief moment, everything went completely silent. No wind, no sound, nothing. And then, just like before, everything went black. When I woke up again, I was back in the desert just like before. But everything was different. I could feel it in my bones. I didn't just see the stars anymore. I felt them. I wasn't the same person. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like I had crossed a line, like I had become something else, something not entirely human. I don't know if I'll ever be the same. I don't know if I'm still me. I've tried to tell people about what happened, but they don't understand. They can't understand. And maybe that's for the best. I don't know what they wanted with me or why they chose me, but I can't ignore the feeling anymore. The pull, the connection. It's still there. Every time I look at the sky, it's like they're waiting for me. I don't know what comes next, but I'm afraid it's only just beginning. I don't know if I'll ever find the answers, but I can't shake the feeling that something is coming. Something I can't outrun, something that's already inside me.